Good day, you hillbilly historian, here to bring you the honest to God truth about what's going on in this world today and the truth about our history. History you won't find in your high school or college textbooks. Well, today I'm going to talk about Richard Milhouse Nixon. Now, Nixon was raised in a Quaker family. He was, anti-violence, anti-war, but he went to a little college. I think he played football at that college. So he wasn't totally against violence, because football back in his day, when he was young, men like him and Gerald Ford, they just played with a leather strap on their head. There was a congressman one time said the problem with Gerald Ford was he played football before they wore helmets. I thought it was funny, but media gave him a hard time for it, and he apologized the next day. I hate it when somebody says something witty and smart and intelligent and then apologize for it. That ain't no way to be. Show some backbone and stand up behind your jokes. You know, when somebody gives me a hard time for my jokes, I'll say, tough. If you can't take it, quit listening to them. But anyway, Richard Milhouse Nixon, he was elected in 1968, a real close election against Hubert Humphrey, and then won by a landslide in 1972. And there was a break-in at Watergate. And the Washington Post and New York Times and LA Times and Chicago Tribune, ABC, NBC, CBS, they all began to show the negative side of Nixon. They went after Agnew, found where he had taken a kickback when he was governor of Maryland, and so they drove him out of office. Ford, Gerald R. Ford, was appointed vice president, and then when news media ran Nixon out of office in 1974, Gerald R. Ford was appointed president, or became president automatically, since he was appointed vice president. So Gerald R. Ford served as vice president of the United States and as president of the United States, and was the only man never elected to either office. They used to have a joke back in them days. Said, what does Gerald Ford and Brezhnev have in common? Neither one of them got elected. Well, Brezhnev was elected by the Communist Party, who were the only people allowed to select leaders in Russia at that time. Of course, now they have the vote, and they elect their presidents just like we do ours. But anyway, Richard M. Nixon was portrayed as a crook, a gangster, all this stuff. They went after him. The judicial system. Now you talk about going after Trump. Trump ain't the first man they went after. They went after Andrew Johnson back in 1865. And they went after Richard Milhouse Nixon. The media, Bernstein, Woodward and Bernstein, they were the crooks. They were the gangsters printing lies every day. And it was proven that some of their stories were lies. Richard Nixon was not the crook. You know, when he got up and said, "I am not a crook," he was right. Now, I voted for Nixon twice, but you know, he was a rhino. He was a socialist. He gave us more government intrusion into our private lives than any president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was right on the verge of being a Marxist communist. And Richard Nixon, he gave us OSHA, he gave us the EPA, and EPA was one of the most intrusive, dictatorial departments we ever had in our government. I mean, they destroyed people's lives over some of the smallest insignificant reasons. EPA was one of the most intrusive agencies ever formed in Washington, D.C. They were almost as intrusive as J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. And they were very intrusive. Almost as intrusive as Dulles' CIA. And they were very intrusive. But Richard Nixon did give us a very intrusive government. But Richard Milhouse Nixon was not a crook. The real crook in that Watergate crap was the Washington Post, Woodward and Bernstein, New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS. They wanted to see if they could destroy a president. And boy, they tried. And they succeeded. They really did. You know, when the Graham guy who owned the Washington Post, he wasn't liberal enough. He wasn't left-wing enough. He wasn't anti-U.S. government enough. So, he supposedly shot himself in a hotel room in Washington, D.C., and the FBI ruled it suicide. But there's many who thought that he was murdered so that his widow, his wife, could take over the Washington Post, and she was very, very liberal. And her and Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the Washington Post, they were extremely liberal, extremely anti-Republican, extremely anti-government when a Republican administration was in power. And they went after Richard Milhouse Nixon. And you know, if Howard Baker Jr., senator from Tennessee, and Barry Goldwater, senator from Arizona, if they had had the courage to stand up against the Washington Post and the major line media at that time, Richard Nixon would not have had to resign. But Baker, in fact, it was Baker and Butterfield, another Republican, in front of the Watergate Committee that exposed the fact that Nixon was recording everything that was said in the White House, in the Oval Office. And they were the ones that exposed that. And of course, it was the tapes that the media went after to try to find where Nixon had said something about Watergate or something that they could hold against him. And there was all kinds of court cases. They went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court ruled that they could take the tapes away from him. And they found a 19-minute gap in one of the tapes. Of course, the media went crazy over that, thinking he had erased part of the tapes. It was sickening. And then they found where Nixon told one of his aides something about Watergate that they could hold against him. And boy, they did. They went after him. And they were going to prosecute and impeach him. And he resigned to save the nation from being impeached. As soon as Gerald Ford went in office, he pardoned Nixon to save, because they saw where the buttholes, the media, wanted to go after Nixon and get out of there. It just was absolutely sickening what they were doing to Nixon. Nixon wasn't the crook. The crook was the Washington Post. Ben Bradley, Miss Graham, Woodward and Bernstein, and Bradley didn't think there was going to be much to the Watergate story. That's why he assigned two rookies, two of the lowest investigative reporters on staff, to that task. But Woodward and Bernstein, they were like bulldogs, but they printed a lot of lies, and they were exposed as liars. But nobody wrote about that. Nobody said anything about that. That wasn't a news story. They wanted to destroy Nixon and his administration. And as soon as Ford went in, they went to work on Ford. I mean, these people are sick. This media bunch. You saw how they went after Trump. And thank God the American people woke up enough that they were able to elect Trump anyway, despite the lying media and their intrusive destruction of the Republican Party and Republican candidates. But Richard Milhouse Nixon was not the crook. He was not the problem. The problem was the American media, the lying, backstabbing media, anti-American, Marxist-controlled media. ABC, NBC, CBS, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune. They were all run by Marxists and criminals, and they wanted to make the United States look bad. It's absolutely sickening what the media did to Richard M. Nixon. And look what they did to the poor old Joe McCarthy. McCarthy was a great World War II warrior. He was a tail gunner, B-17, flew over Europe. You'd never see Ben Bradley or Woodward or Bernstein in the military. They never served a day in the damn military. They were just lying SOBs, anti-government, Marxist-controlled, backstabbing SOBs. You know, Woodward wrote a book one time trying to make Reagan look bad, and claimed he interviewed Casey, the head of the CIA under Reagan, that he had gone to the hospital and interviewed him, and the date he gave and the time and all that for that interview, Casey was in a coma. The medical records proved he was in a coma. So Woodward was nothing but a bald-faced, lying, low-life SOB. But Baker wouldn't stand up for Nixon, and neither would Goldwater, because they were terrified of the media as well. They didn't want to get in trouble with the media and be listed and blackballed by the media. Uh, so they wouldn't stand up for Nixon. You know, when Clinton was in office, committed horrendous crimes, real crimes. The Grand Kleagle of the KKK from West Virginia, Robert Byrd, he stood up for Clinton. So did John Glenn from Ohio, senator from Ohio. John Glenn, the first American to circumnavigate the globe in a satellite. Absolutely unbelievable. They stood up for the biggest crook we've ever had for president. And so, you know, they protected him. Voted to keep him in office. But Barry Goldwater and Howard Baker wouldn't do it. They were self-serving rhino cowards. And let me tell you something, rhinos are worse than Democrats. Because at least you know a Democrat is a socialist, communist, Marxist-loving lowlife. Rhino, they lie to us for our votes and then vote socialist when they get in the government. They're backstabbing lowlifes. They're worse than Democrats. Because at least you know where a Democrat's coming from. Rhinos lie to you constantly. Worse liars than the Democrats. It's very rare that you find a good Republican like Donald Trump. But Richard Milhouse Nixon, he was not the crook. He was not the problem. He was not the issue. The issue was the media destroying him. But nobody ever talks about that or writes about that. They just talk about how Nixon, with shame, withdrew from office. But he wouldn't have withdrawn if Baker and Goldwater and all of them stood up and helped him. But they backstabbed him terribly, awfully. It was amazing. Richard Milhouse Nixon. But Nixon gave us a terrible recession. I remember hauling my garbage off. We didn't have garbage delivery, so we had to haul our garbage off in a little town of Cahutta, Georgia, where I was teaching school in them days and working. And Nixon put us in a recession, and I'd haul my garbage off, and I'd see families scrounging through the garbage and finding pieces of tomato or pieces of lettuce and bits of food and dropping it into cellophane bags as they scoured through the garbage looking for food. And I had a friend at a little local country store there in Cahutta, a lady that run the store, and she told me she knew families that were buying Alpo dog food and they didn't own a dog or a cat or anything. They were buying Alpo and spicing it and cooking it and serving it to their children. That was a tough recession under Nixon. And Marla Maples, who married Donald Trump, was from Cahutta. Her father invested heavily in a real estate project, and the Nixon recession destroyed him. Just basically pulled the rug right out from under his real estate efforts, and it was terrible. I mean, a lot of people got wiped out. I know Marla Maples' father ended up living in a trailer. He failed, financially failed, and his wife kicked him out, and he had a tough time. And it all was due to Nixon's recession. But uh, it was terrible times. But the media was just as evil, low-life, lying, backstabbing mothers back then, just like they are today. Today, they just don't try to pretend. You know, back then they used to pretend that they were honest and unbiased. But that was a huge lie, because they were not unbiased at all, never have been. And today they're even worse. Today they're just out and out Marxists, haters. They hate Republicans, they hate Trump, and they tell every lie they can come up with. They spend their nights thinking up new lies to throw at us the next day. It's absolutely amazing what the media gets away with in this country. I wish Trump would cancel every one of their communication licenses and shut them all down. We'd be better off without them. But anyway, this is your hillbilly historian giving you the truth, honest, God, common sense truth about Richard Milhouse Nixon and American history that you won't find in your high school or college textbooks. So, you have a good day. Signing off here in East Tennessee and Appalachia.